You'd think a ripped boarding pass is just paper. Right. 3 seconds of chaos rings out and then it's over. But that tear pulled open a life I didn't know I had, and what followed felt like the kind of lesson you only learn when everything you thought mattered gets taken away, and then given back different. This is my story. How a ticket, a hoodie, and a single snap judgment flipped a whole airport on its head, and what happened next still makes me wonder who gets to decide who belongs. Act 1. The moment. It was the day before Christmas Terminal 2 at Riverside International, buzzing like a beehive on espresso crowds moving in waves, tired parents juggling kids and wrapping paper fluorescent lights humming the same old song. I was 23, hoodie on hair, in a messy bun. Sneakers scuffed just me, heading to a window seat that my backpack and I had earned fair and square. My name's Avery Brooks, and I had a ticket that said 2A in bold letters and priority in a stamp so bright you could see it across the room. She stood at the podium like she owned the air itself. Linda Hale, senior cabin manager, hairsprayed into a perfect helmet uniform, crisp enough to iron a mirror badge glinting like a sheriff's star. Her voice over the PA sounded sweet, the kind of sweetness that never reached the eyes. Priority boarding only. Please prepare your documents, she chirped, hunting the crowd like a hawk hunts field mice. When I stepped up, I smiled, polite, small, and held out the thick cream stock boarding pass my phone had printed at the kiosk. Linda read it, and for a beat the world went quiet in the way it does before something snaps. You don't belong here, she announced loud enough for the red carpet line to hear like she was delivering the verdict on a stage. Behind her, people smiled at the performance, the kind of smiles that make you feel even smaller. I do. I said, my voice steady, but my fingers cold. Seat 2A, priority. She laughed, a short, sharp sound of pure derision, and told me to step aside, motioning me toward the back of the line like I was an extra in a play she couldn't wait to end. Somebody behind me muttered something about common sense and respect the rules. You ever feel the weight of someone's laugh on your shoulders? That laugh landed like a slap. When she snatched the boarding pass from my hand, I thought it would be a quick check. Her fingers paused, then tightened. She scanned the ticket with a showman's flourish, her lips curling into that same little triumphant smirk, and then, right there in front of the whole gate, she tore it. Not one clean rip, but with purpose, like she was destroying the idea of me more than the paper. Fraud, she declared, and called for security. Every muscle in me wanted to shout, to plead, to show my phone, my confirmation email, my bank charge confirmation, but I didn't. I stood still, because there are moments where adding volume only gives people a reason to enjoy the show. Instead, I did the only thing that felt calm and true. I dialed my father. Act 2. The turn. Nobody in that crowd knew my last name. But Linda had an ego the size of the terminal, and she assumed it was enough to make a spectacle. My father, Daniel Caldwell, had been outspoken about airline culture for years. Not a CEO or a billionaire, just someone who believed that travel shouldn't be a weighted ladder for the polished and the wealthy. He wasn't wealthy in the way tabloids write checks, he was wealthy in reputation and in the right people listening. When he picked up the phone, I put it on speaker without thinking. Dad, I said, voice small in a room where everyone suddenly wanted to be the jury. She ripped my ticket up and called security. There was a silence, like the pause when you hold your breath underwater, and then his calm voice, which always made complicated things seem manageable. Avery, stay right there, do not move. A few minutes later, screens at the gate blinked red. The boarding system hiccuped, and a message popped up. Immediate ground hold, senior management intervention. The door that was sliding shut stalled halfway, and 2 men in plain suits moved through the crowd with that quiet, urgent energy of people who don't ask permission. My father wasn't the sort to burst in and shout. He walked through the gate and looked at me the way someone looks at a person they've loved long enough to know the shape of their courage. Linda's smile cracked the second she saw him. Not because she recognized him, but because whatever small kingdom she'd built there suddenly felt like a stage under a spotlight. My dad didn't scream, he didn't threaten. He asked one question, slow, precise. Why did you rip her ticket? Linda stammered protocol dress codes. She didn't look like she belonged. The same garbage she'd said before the cameras warmed up. and the crowd leaned in, phones raised like little altars to outrage. Some faces that had been laughing were suddenly uncertain. Some switched to being smugly curious. A man who'd shoved me earlier tried to step back, his cashmere jacket suddenly too loud in a room that had just been rewired by quiet authority. My dad could have burned the whole terminal down with one call, but that's not his style. He watched me, then looked at Linda and turned a decision over to me like a hot coin. "What happens now, Avery?" he asked. The power of the moment was not in the money or the hold, but in the choice he handed me, punish or teach. I knew exactly what humiliation felt like. I'd lived with it like an old bruise. I didn't want to humiliate back. I wanted something that mattered for Linda to understand and for the system that enabled her to shift. So I asked for two things: an apology, and for her to meet me later, not in a courtroom, not under a camera, but in a training room, where people could talk about what had happened, where she could see the effect of her actions on someone she assumed she knew by looking. Act 3. The Aftermath and the Question. The video of the ticket tear spread faster than any announcement the airline could make, hashtags blooming like weeds, people choosing sides as if they were drafting banners. Internally, Riverside Air's PR teams scrambled legal, took their gloves off, and Linda was pulled into a meeting where the consequences were spelled out in terms she understood: loss of position, probation, mandatory training. But the thing that surprised everyone was what happened weeks later. I could have asked for blood. I could have demanded Linda be fired, shamed, exiled from the world of polished shoes and clipped greetings. Instead, I did what I hope we'd all do when we want to change something larger than an individual. I offered her a path that would force reflection, not just punishment. Linda was moved to a different role, one that required boots instead of heels, one that put her on the tarmac helping teams load baggage in rain and snow. Hard, honest work that strips ego down to bone. She fought it, protested, cried, and for a long time I expected anger. What I didn't expect was seeing her months later behind a coffee counter in Terminal 5. The hairspray was gone, the lipstick faded into practicality, and the armor she'd worn for 2 decades had been replaced by a work apron and calloused hands. She told me quietly about back pain from lifting bags, about sleepless nights worrying over mortgage notices, about the slow grinding realization that authority without empathy is a brittle thing. She apologized, not in a flash for the internet way, but in a way that trembled with ownership. I listened. Then I surprised myself. I offered her something. We were launching a mentorship program aimed at teaching new hires. Conflict resolution and dignity under pressure, and I wanted someone who knew the old rules, someone who'd court them and then be honest about why they were wrong. "Teach," I said. "Teach them what you learned, Linda." People online labeled me magnanimous, naive, or both. Some said I let her off easy, others called it justice. Linda showed up the first day with bruised knuckles from baggage handling and with a notebook full of mistakes she was willing to read aloud. She didn't ask for forgiveness, she asked to work. This is the part that gets messy, because not everyone believes redemption looks like a second chance, and not everyone thinks accountability can coexist with opportunity. Some of the passengers who filmed that day wanted her fired on the spot. Others wanted her publicly shamed. I wanted both truth and repair, and that made me an oddball on the internet. The training program we built wasn't soft. We put real consequences where they mattered, but we also demanded that people learn what their biases cost others when they acted on them. Months turned into years. Linda kept showing up. She was awkward at first in front of the recruits, then honest, then quietly fierce about not letting anyone in that room make the kind of call she once made. She became one of the toughest teachers we'd ever hired because she had scars that were visible and lessons that weren't theoretical. The airline changed policy. The PR storm faded, and my life, the one that started with a ripped ticket and a hoodie, became a weird kind of platform for people who'd never had one. So now I ask you, because this story isn't clean, and that's the point, what would you have done if you found yourself with the power to ruin a person who'd hurt your child? Would you forgive? If you'd been the person in the uniform, would you have been able to step back and learn? Does punishment have to be public to be effective? Or does public punishment just feed a different kind of cruelty? Tell me what you think. Are second chances too generous? Or are they the only thing that breaks cycles? If you've seen something like this a time, someone judged another by clothes, by accent, by a haircut, share it. Comment below, tell us whether you'd fire Linda mentor her or something in between. Hit like. If this made you pause, share if you think someone else needs to hear it, and subscribe if you want more stories that don't just entertain but make us wrestle with the messy stuff, bias, justice, and what it really takes to change a heart.